Thank you. Thanks so much. So I think I've been told I have 20 minutes. I'm going to turn the timer on because my girlfriend tells me that I'm the only child who likes the sound of my own voice, so I'm going to kind of try to... no, she really loves me. Actually, she's here. Look at that. Oh, look at that. So, so what I thought I'd do is, how many over here are familiar with, I guess most of you using Box, you know who Box is. Let me give you a quick kind of overview. We're about a $500 million company based in Redwood City. We are hiring aggressively in the product field. So if any of you are looking for jobs, you should, by all means, look to us. We are about 76,000 customers, and we've got about 56 million users. So the interesting part, and the lens I'll talk to you about with today is primarily around looking at an enterprise lens with consumer sensibility. So that's the kind of goal, because we are actually a company which has a very, very high obsession on elegance of design and the way that you actually have a frictionless design, but we also have a very high emphasis on enterprise customers. So our customers include companies like GE and Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble and Eli Lilly, AstraZeneca, so on and so forth. So what I thought I'd do is, rather than give you the whole commercial on Box, and I'm going to skip through the couple slides of Box earlier since a lot of you use it, I thought I'd give you my top 10 lessons that I've learned in just the field of product management. And if you think about product management, it's probably one of the most leveraged kind of positions that you can see in a company. And what I mean by that is, one mistake on the product management side has ripple effects throughout the entire organization for many, many years to come. Because if you have a mistake made by product management in a team, typically 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 engineers will get misdirected. Now, once you've actually got the engineers misdirected, then product marketing is going to go out and have the wrong message. Then you're going to have sales go out and sell the wrong thing, and customer success is going to face escalations. So there's actually a pretty big ripple effect. So we as a community have one, it's good for us from a job security perspective. We've got an important job. But two is it's a lot of responsibility, because you can't generally fuck it up that much. So I thought I'd give you the top 10 learnings I've had. And these are kind of, a lot of these have actually been blatantly plagiarized from other people. So it's not just things that I've come up with, but they're kind of ideas that were good ideas that I decided to say, if I just use this rubric, it typically helps me in having a good picture on how to run a good product org. And so, and we, at this point in time, we're a little over $100 million in spend just on the product side of the house. So there's a fair amount of kind of investment that we're making in our core product. And if you think about Box, we think of ourselves as a very product-led company, where all the value originates from the product, and then we actually take the product out to market. But we are very much of a product-first kind of company in the way we think about it. So the first one, and I think is probably the most important rule that I think about, in my mind, from a product manager's perspective, the most important thing you can do is pick the right problem to solve. And in the way I think about this, the quality of the problem that you pick is directly proportionate to the caliber of people that you're going to attract to solve the problem with you. And if you actually, it's a very counterintuitive thing, because if you actually pick an easy problem, your likelihood of success, and Sam Altman talks about this quite a bit, but your likelihood of success is no greater than if you pick a hard problem, because you'll actually have mediocre people that come to solve easy problems, and as a result, you're not going to have the outcome that you're looking for. But if you actually pick a really hard problem, you'll have a really good outcome that comes at the end of it. So the quality of the problem is super important, and deeply thinking about what problem do you want to solve. Is it actually a problem? Is it a real problem that people are going to be willing to pay money for? Is extremely important as you think about building a product. Right? So that's the first rule we think about. So we start everything in the way that we think about our Box is, what's the problem, and then work backwards from the problem, rather than a feature that you're trying to jam into the solution by the end of it. And this, while it seems pretty obvious, you'll be surprised at how many companies actually don't start with the problem first, and they start with a feature and then try to jam it into a problem. So that's the first rule. The second one is, and we have this as one of the core values at Box, which is think 10x. And the way to what we mean by that specifically is, if you just do a 20% improvement on a current process, it's not enough to motivate people to move over to you. So unless you're 10 times better, orders of magnitude better than the way that it is right now, chances are people aren't going to move over to the new way of doing things. They're not going to move over to you, because the inertia and the amount of work it takes to move over to something else is far greater than the value you're going to deliver. It's going to be, if it's going to be a 10, 15, 20% improvement. So the way we think about it is, you have to think 10x in the core initial thesis of the value proposition you're delivering to the market, or you'll actually find abysmal kind of adoption. And if you don't have that value proposition identified, then the rest of the presentations today really won't matter, because growth only happens, adoption only happens for problems that are actually meaningful problems that you're solving, that have a 10x value compared to what you might have today. So that's the second one. Okay, number 3 is, and this is an area that, if you think about, it's much less of an argument in Silicon Valley, but much more so when you go outside of Silicon Valley. But in Silicon Valley, people are starting to get this very intrinsically, which is you got to build experiences that people love and can't live without, right? So we always talk about internally, are we going to be a vitamin or are we going to be a painkiller? Much better to be in the painkiller business than the vitamin business, right? Vitamin's nice to have, and the bad part about that is in user feedback sessions, it's very hard to disprove the value of a vitamin, because people generally want to be good to you. So they'll say, yeah, that's valuable, but when it actually comes down to putting hard cash on the table for your product, unless you're a painkiller, it actually doesn't get to the sense of urgency that you need. So, make sure that if you're building a product, you're building it more on the painkiller side than the vitamin side, is the way that we think about it. And you have to build experiences that people fundamentally love and are immersive, where you can't really ignore the end user by the end of it, because otherwise you tend to just go out and bring the overall average impact of technology down as a society, right? So that's one thing that we think about. So that's number 3. Number 4, and I think there's only 2 stages that a company is typically in. It's either before product market fit or it's after product market fit. And when you're before product market fit, literally nothing else matters but getting a product market fit, right? Once you get to product market fit, then all the other things around scaling and all of those things make a lot of sense. But until you've got to product market fit, maniacally focus on getting a product market fit before you run out of money. And one of the things that we found out through hard work is actually in the phase of getting to product market fit, abundance of resource is actually your enemy, not your friend. Because scarcity actually brings about a lot of creative ways that you might be able to do things. So when we start and incubate ideas, we keep teams very small. We tend to not kind of inflate teams too much a box anyway. We'll keep them at about an 8-10 per person team size. But we try to keep teams extremely small when you're trying to get to product market fit. Once you've got to product market fit, then you might be able to go to the other stages. Now, once you've got to product market fit, in the enterprise space, the second phase typically is identify a repeatable selling motion, right? Where you're not selling snowflakes, but you're selling it on an ongoing basis over and over again. Identify the use cases that are going to be continually consumed. Once you've picked out the repeatable selling motion, then think about scaling. If you start scaling before you get to product market fit, it actually completely is a wasted effort that doesn't really get you to what you need to get to by the end of it. So that's the way that we think about it, is get to product market fit first. Now, there's a lot of question around what denotes product market fit. In my mind, I think about it very easily, which is if you have retention, you've got product market fit. If you don't have product retention, chances are you don't have product market fit. And product retention being someone used your product, found it valuable, and came back again to use it. Found it valuable again, came back again, and became a habit, and they keep coming back over and over again, right? And so the way you get to product market fit is just go out and measure whether or not people keep coming back to your product. If they don't keep coming back to your product, no matter what you tell yourself, you're not at product market fit. And probably 80% of the people that think they're at product market fit aren't actually at product market fit. And then once you get to product market fit, doesn't mean that you have it forever. You lose that pretty quickly as well. So you have to constantly keep asking yourself, are we at product market fit? Have we lost it? How do we need to go out and resurrect it? So the next rule then is we have this philosophy that we've copied from Facebook shamelessly, which is in order to get growth, first solve the problem of retention. If you don't solve retention, if your users that are coming in aren't staying with you and they're attriting after the first or second time, don't focus on the top of the funnel, because it just becomes a leaky bucket and you're not really going to get a whole lot out of it. So to drive growth, you must have retention. And once you have retention, then think about the top of the funnel for acquisition. And I don't want to steal Ken's thunder. He's going to talk a lot more about that than I can. And Ken ran, he was in the Facebook growth team. Now he's running growth at Google. So there's no better person to talk about that than him. So that's the next rule, which is retention drives growth. And so make sure that you're focused on retention maniacally. By the way, this is an area that seems completely counterintuitive, because the metric that you typically tend to have, if your retention curve asymptotes towards 0 really, really quickly within like, week 1, week 2, you've got a problem that you have to fix above all else. So we've had products in the past where you might have had 90% attrition after the first login, right? There's no point trying to invest money on the top of the funnel to get more people in. Let's just fix that problem first. And then you can go out and kind of worry about retention, about growth. The next one is another kind of area that Alex Schultz talks about quite a bit at Facebook, which is this whole notion of which kind of user do you need to build what features for? And we as a product management community have a huge blind side and a deficit, which is we all think about users as power users, right? And the reality is most of your challenges aren't with power users. They're with the occasional user, what Alex calls the marginal user, right? And so what ends up happening there is you will build capabilities for the power user, and all that'll happen is the people that are already using you are going to keep using you more and more. But in order to drive growth, it's not the power users you care about. You already got them, right? It's the marginal user that you care about, making sure that they come onto the channel. So this is an area that we actually think about quite a bit in our products. So if you think about the stage that a product might be in maturity, when you're getting to product market fit, all you need to focus on is the power user. You don't need to focus on the marginal user. But just focus on the power user, make sure that they actually love the product and that they start to see the behavior of retention. Once you get past product market fit and you're trying to scale, marginal users make a whole lot of sense, and that's the most easy one to ignore instinctively by all of us. Why? Because we all know our product really well. So we can think about 15 ways to make it better, but those aren't the things that people are doing most of the time when they're using your product, right? I'll give you an example. We had a capability that we debated a lot internally. So it was called differences in our Notes product. So Notes product, basically, when you come into Notes, you can see if you had a lot of changes to the product. You could highlight the changes, right? And it was called diffs, and you basically had diffs as a capability we launched. Would diffs be a good feature if the goal is growth of that product? No, it would not be a good feature. In fact, if your retention curve is after the first week, if you've got 80% of the people not coming back to the product, you shouldn't be building a feature like diffs. You should be building a feature that actually says, what am I going to come back to the product for again? And why is that? Because imagine you had 90% attrition in that product where people weren't coming to it, and you built diffs. Do you think people are now going to come to your product and say, you know what, because it has diffs, I'm going to keep coming back to the product over and over again? No. So that's an example of a capability where diffs is for the power user, but what you might need is a capability for the marginal user to go out and drive growth, right? The next one is a really important point that we've learned from Amazon. And this one is this whole notion of two pizza teams. The moment you actually have teams that are very large, you tend to create much more administrative nightmare on how do you keep everyone up to date, right? So the key to going out and having an innovative culture where you can continue to have high velocity of innovation is keeping your team small. And what Amazon does is they say every single team that we have, we try to keep it that can be fed with 2 pizzas. If it takes more than 2 pizzas to feed the entire team, that's probably too large a team. Now, of course, they're going to have teams in certain areas which might be larger, but in general, that's a pretty good rule to have applied. I'd say about 70 to 80% of Box's teams tend to be 2 pizza teams, right? We'll go out and break down the unit of work into small enough pieces. I don't know what happened there. Yeah. And so there was an acronym over there called PPOD, which is, so what do you think about when you think of a 2 pizza team? Well, there's a certain set of roles you need to make sure that you have in a pod that we think about. So PPOD is an acronym for the kind of roles that we typically have in the composition of a team at Box, right? So the first P stands for product management. E stands for engineering. A stands for architect. The other P stands for program management. Program management is different from product management, and typically, oftentimes you'll find that product managers are asked to do a lot of keeping the trains running on time. There's a very different set of humans that know how to keep the trains running on time from the set of humans that know how to creatively think about the next major breakthrough product idea. And you have to make sure that typically those 2 qualities don't exist in a single human. So try not to find people that have both those qualities. Just have 2 different people that actually have those two qualities in the team. So P for product management, E for engineering. A for analytics, another P for program management, O for kind of online growth is what we think about, and then D for design. And that's actually the composition of a team. Now, of course, you're not going to have just one engineer. You might have a team of 6 to 8 engineers in a team. But that's what we try to have in a team when we think about a pod that we actually have a local mission for. And it's totally okay in a company to have many, many goals. But it's not okay for a team to have more than 1 or 2 goals. Because that's when you start having dissipation of energy going towards too many goals. So what we try to do at Box is, at this point in time, we're such a large company that there's a lot of goals that you're going to have in different areas. But every team has 1 or 2 major metrics that they're going to be measured on. And they know exactly if they're going to succeed or fail based on achievement of those metrics. And we try to structure the teams based on this P-pod structure. Last one, or last couple, is as you're hiring people, people will say, do I hire for intellect? Do I hire for experience? Do I hire for all these different kind of things? I personally feel hunger and curiosity trumps all else in the hiring process. If you don't have enough hunger and you're not curious enough, I don't care if you're the most smart person on the planet, you're the most technical person on the planet, without the hunger, you just don't go out and do things the way you need to do them. This is, by the way, the thing that Jyoti and I worry the most about our child, which is, we're pretty blessed in some ways and we're living a pretty good life. She's 6 years old. How do we make sure that she stays hungry? Because that's actually the single property that's actually gotten the people successful versus not, is ones that are hungry, right? And so hunger and curiosity trumps all else. The other one is the half-life of a company and a business model today is actually shrinking quite a bit. It used to be where a company would have a half-life of 25, 30 years. It's now the case that a half-life of a company is about 5 to 7 years. Which means in 5 to 7 years, your company's business model typically completely changes, right? And their company's kind of core product life cycle tends to be about 36 months. What that says to you is if you take 2 years to go out and build a product, chances are by the time you release the product, it's going to be too late for you to go out and do anything. So that's the piece that really matters. And the last one is purpose really matters when you're building an org. Because when you're going to have hard times in a company when you'll have bumps along the way. And when you have the bumps along the way, if you actually have the right level of mission and purpose that's built in the local team mission as well as the overall company mission, that's what keeps people around during the bad times. During the good times, it's pretty easy to keep people around. It's during the bad times that when you can keep people around, that's when you can actually get out of the bad times and go back into a resurrection mode. So overall, these are the kind of 10 tips that we think about when we are thinking at Box on how we build out product orgs, how we think about kind of motivating people, building out the teams. And then I figured because this is a special audience, I'll give you one last parting thought. And that one was, in order to sustainably scale, you have to first start with doing things that don't scale, right? In order to achieve hyperscale, don't start by thinking about hyperscale first. First start by doing things that don't scale before you can scale fast. And I'll give you an example. If you're starting out on a product and it's a really breakthrough idea and you think it's something that's going to really change the world, by nature, people start thinking about how do I scale this thing? What am I going to do to get to millions of users? What I would do first is and we do this with a program internally called F10 program, which is our flagship 10 customers. Whenever we launch a product, the first thing that's required by a product team is get the first 10 customers extremely happy in a completely non-scalable way. And what I mean by a non-scalable way is if they need an engineer or a product manager sitting by them, that you have to fly out from one part of the country to the other so that they can just get the product up and running, you would do that during that phase of the cycle. And the reason for that is, if after all that white glove treatment, you can't get that customer happy, chances of you doing it at scale is 0. So don't even try to do that at scale first. First try to go out and make sure that you do things that don't scale, get to product market fit, get a repeatable selling motion, and then you can scale.